Hi, my name is Jeff Pagano, and welcome to the Harpin On Rugby podcast. Joining me this week is someone making his 40th pod appearance, and he also runs the online entity known as Post to Post Sport, where he's been paying particular attention to the Rugby World Cup qualifying process. Welcome back to Mr. Kieran Duffy.
Yeah, I'll be busy over the next little while because the final qualification tournament is starting off. I had a bonus feature at the end of October for a lot of news, which you covered some of in your words on Substack, but a new feature this Monday when this podcast comes out, looking at the final qualification tournament, previewing all of those teams and the usual rugby bullets. So that's all the plugging I'm going to do for Post Sport on this one anyway. But we'll get back to Harpin On.
Well, it's an interesting process because there's actually, of course, there's 4 extra teams qualifying for this World Cup. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. And of course, some countries are wasting their opportunities by fielding ineligible players. But sure, you can find out all about that on your excellent website. Post
Surprisingly, it wasn't Spain.
Yeah, exactly. For once,
they didn't carry on the 3 in a row.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, listen, let's turn our attention now to our feature match of the week. We all know what it was, who was playing, and where it was. But here's a generic 80-word summary of it anyway. Ireland fell 13-26 to New Zealand in Chicago, surrendering a halftime lead as the All Blacks scored 3 late tries. Tadhg Furlong's early effort and a Jack Crowley penalty gave Ireland some hope, despite Tadhg Beirne's 20-minute red card. Line-out struggles and missed opportunities plagued their second half. Caelan Doris returned from injury and Paddy McCarthy earned his first cap. Captain Dan Sheehan admitted Ireland were inaccurate and must improve ahead of their upcoming home fixtures. Now, obviously, we're going to go into a bit more detail than that. And to kick things off, Kieran wants to harp on the way the All Blacks were just simply more clinical in their finishing, especially in the second half.
Yeah, and I think, generally speaking, the game changed around the 60th minute. In the first half, New Zealand didn't have a whole lot of chances, and they probably scored their one try from their one chance. It was a really well-worked try, and, if Ireland go in 10-0 up or even 10-3 up, that's completely different. That's a completely different game for the second half. But just the fact that New Zealand managed to stay in reach the whole way to the hour mark. Jack Crowley obviously kicked the penalty. He had a penalty attempt that went wide. I think it was from about 40 metres out, in fairness, and it wasn't exactly right in front of the post. So it was 13-7. And I think a lot of us were expecting Ireland to kind of push on and get another score. I think you said in the WhatsApp group, next score is absolutely crucial, and Ireland didn't get it anyway. I think like Ireland were, just controlling the game well then, right? Around the 60th minute. I'm going to mispronounce his name, probably, apologies, but around the half an hour mark, Tupai put in a big turnover on around the halfway. Ireland were nearly into the New Zealand 22, and New Zealand get that big turnover, and suddenly New Zealand have a line out 5 metres out. In that time, Ireland make a sub. Kelleher comes on for Sheehan. There was a tackle checked on Ringrose. There was no foul play. It was just a penalty. In fairness, there was no foul play at all. It was just a really meaty tackle, I suppose. But from there, I don't know, was it straight from that penalty or is it from the next penalty? But New Zealand go for a tap and go and get over after 2 phases. Fairly easily got over, I would say. I'd say they didn't exactly have to work particularly hard for that try. Now, the ref did call it very early because it looked like it could have been held up. I don't know if it was. There was kind of no clear evidence that it was, but Ian Henderson was adamant that it did get held up. And suddenly, New Zealand are in front, they convert it. The ref had awarded a try, so there would have to be clear evidence to overturn it, which I don't think there was. So obviously whatever the ref saw, he was happy with. To be honest, I think in the end New Zealand probably deserved to win because they were more clinical, but just then from the restart, Ireland have another chance. Really good chip over the top by Jack Crowley. Tommy O'Brien, I think it was Tommy O'Brien or Jamie Osborne, came really close to gathering it. It's just knocked on. It was a smart bit of play, and New Zealand get a scrum, and then suddenly they get up the other end of the pitch again, and you're kind of like, what happened there? James Lowe actually got back really well to recover a deep kick in his own half, but then New Zealand just sliced Ireland open easily. I mean, it was it was kind of a bit like a training match. And I suddenly then it's 21-13 to New Zealand, and you're kind of thinking, what happened? We were in control of this game. And I think the issue was Ireland didn't build enough of a lead when they were in control for that. I feel like for the first hour of the game, Ireland were generally the better side, not by a significant margin. I don't think it was quite Chicago 9 years ago, but Ireland were the better team for the majority of those 60 minutes, and then suddenly, you're looking at we're suddenly behind, and New Zealand are just in control of the game, and you don't want to be chasing a New Zealand team, no matter even if they're not the New Zealand team of 2011, 2015. But then from there, Ireland just completely lost their way. I mean, Ireland had no real impact on the game. I feel like New Zealand got another try in the 77th minute. Ireland were just pinned back in their own half. It came off a scrum, wasn't converted, which probably makes the scoreline look a little bit better. But at that stage, the game was over. They actually got over again in the 80th minute when there was a forward pass in there. It was a clearly forward pass, but again, just the manner of that try it wasn't a good try. It wasn't allowed, but just the manner of they kind of had three players running into space. No one was there to catch them. If the pass hadn't been forward, it would have been an easy walkthrough for any of one of three players. So in general, I just think, there's 2 points. There's one, Ireland had a lot of possession and a lot of territory and a lot of the ball and just in good positions and just couldn't make anything happen, after the first try. The first try was good and it came at an important time, but I think after that, like every time New Zealand got the ball, they kind of looked like scoring, and they only really had the ball 4 or 5 times in dangerous positions. Ardy Sabea's try in the first half, I think it was really good hands by New Zealand, and to be honest, I think that's just hard to handle anyway. I don't think there's much Ireland can do about that. You could argue that maybe the defence was a little bit narrow, but you look at Ireland's one try, it came off a line-out, which is a bit surprising because the line-out was fairly awful. Yeah, I think in general, just Ireland just didn't take any real chances, and I wouldn't read too much into Jack Crowley's one missed penalty because it was 40 metres out. I think it was probably the right decision to go for the penalty. 40 metres out, bit of a weird angle. I mean, it wasn't a straightforward kick, and he got one shortly after to make it 13-7, but Ireland needed to get another score, and it just never came. And then, 6 points against New Zealand, that's a very dangerous lead with 20 minutes to go, and they were able to just turn on the style. I don't think New Zealand were great, but I think they were more clinical in general.
Yeah, I mean, apart from, putting the disappointment aside for a second, it was a fascinating match overall. And I suppose if you look back in history of previous results, Ireland against New Zealand, for those three late tries, we got used to that over the years. Before the last time we played them in Chicago, that's the way games tended to go. You think we'd be in it, and then they run in three late tries. But this was a different kind of game. It was a match that was there for the taking, and I really, really honestly believe that final score does not reflect how this match went. But I think from Ireland's point, I think you're right. I think the clinical finishing was the difference. When the All Blacks had their chances, they took them. Ireland had plenty of chances to put this game away. They had the disappointment at the start with Tadhg Beirne, but they still built a lead. We'll talk about the positives later, but the way we attacked for that first try was very impressive. It wasn't just the finish. It was the whole move leading up to it. That was just an impressive passage of play. Gibson Park spoke of before this tour, saying that they were going to try new things. And we saw that in action there, but we just couldn't finish it in the second half. Nothing was coming off for us. That final pass just wouldn't come for us. It'd be knocked on, or Jack would kick it forward, kick it ahead, which was a good idea. You could see it was on. There was space in behind the blitzing New Zealand defense. The ball just wouldn't get there. It just wouldn't sit up for the guy chasing forward. There was one time when Tommy O'Brien ran through on one, and he was sandwiched by two All Blacks. Now, the referee said that they're competing for the ball. I still think Cam Roigard's line clearly changed into Tommy O'Brien's path there, but that's that's neither here nor there. It was still a tough ask for him to get to that with two All Blacks on top of him. It was just that making that final pass count didn't work for Ireland, whereas the All Blacks always seem to have it, or in most cases for their tries. It was just one missed tackle. I think there was a Gary Ringrose one where he slipped, and then when Roygaard scored his try, he basically wrong-footed Craig Casey and put the next two tacklers on the back foot as well, and just got to the line straight away. It was just one slip is all it takes at this level in a big match like this between two of the top four teams, two of the top three teams in the world. They're the margins that make the difference. So it was a more clinical kind of finishing. But another aspect of it, in Ireland, we're kind of obsessed with this debate, and the media is obsessed with this debate: Jack versus Sam, who's better? But I think the reality for this match, I don't think there were three out halves played on the day. Beauden Barrett played the full 80. We had Jack and Sam. I don't think any of the out halves covered themselves in glory. Sam was trying things that weren't on. Now I know we were in a situation where he may have had to force it, but it still looked, he just didn't have the confidence. We've seen him already playing for Leinster this season, maybe lacking a little bit of confidence. But Jack's kicking wasn't great either. There was kicks out in the full. There was, like I say, those kicks forward just weren't quite as accurate as they could have been. He missed a place kick. There was all this kind of thing. But Beauden Barrett was doing it too. He was kicking out in the full. He was rushing clearances. He did one real shocker that went over the end line when he was trying to find touch towards the end. So you could say, well, Chicago, they call it the Windy City, but the fact remains is that Gibson Park and Roygaard, their exit kicks were absolutely top drawer. Gibson especially, he did about four of them, coming from 5 meters from his own line and putting them right in the halfway line. So you can't really blame the wind. So when you have in a situation where the attack isn't really clicking, you've got to get points from other sources, and the All Blacks were just able to manage to do it. Obviously, that first Sevilla try, it came right after our try, so it was a bit of a kick punch to the gut. But the fact is, they did have an extra player. Then they found the space. They were able to find the space in the widest channel to exploit that extra man for that try. So, but like you say, that Ty Furlong try, as impressive as it was also our last try on the day as well. So it was a question of how ready the teams were. The Virgin Media panel before then used the word undercooked about 50,000 times before the kickoff, saying Ireland B. But the fact of the matter is, if there was any sign of us being undercooked, it was only in that last 20 minutes. They were ready to play from the start. They built the lead. They just weren't able to see it out. So,
I think in general, we probably suffered a bit from not having a stronger bench in those last 20 minutes.
The New Zealand bench was absolutely superior.
I mean, I think to briefly say on the fly-off debate, I think Jack Crowley is the one to go with for Ireland right now, and I think, unless things drastically change, I would imagine he'll be starting at 10. I don't like how Sam Prendergast has been overly criticised because he's a very young player who's been thrown in too deep. I don't think it's good that certain sections of the media have called him the second coming of Ronan O'Gara and Johnny Sexton combined, and I don't think it's a good idea that certain anyone but Leinster fans have called him the worst fly-half to ever play the game. I don't think either of those things are fair on any player. It probably wasn't a game for Sam Prendergast because, again, as you said, he was struggling with Leinster. He hadn't had a great... He's been decent for Leinster, but again, it's probably just simply he's still very young. He's still that kind of raw fly-half. It's like... it's probably a game maybe it was a game in the end to have a hindsight, you can say maybe a 6-2 split would have been good, and to have Kieran Frawley on the bench a bit more versatile. But I think Jack Crowley, I don't think he was fantastic against New Zealand, but I think he is the one to go with. But I think you look at, we're bringing Ian Henderson on. Now, Ian Henderson's been a great servant for Ireland, but he's not a replacement for Ty Byrne or James Ryan. Or Joe McCarty, who wasn't playing, but you look at, we're bringing off Paddy McCarty off the bench for his debut, who I think did reasonably well, and in fairness, I don't think you can expect a whole lot from a prop playing his first ever international cap. He's played about 10 games for Leinster against New Zealand, but you look at like we just needed that bit of impact from the bench, and we probably didn't have it. And again, as much as undercooked was the buzzword for the past, it feels like for the past 2 months for Leinster as well, they've been talking about undercooked, but like there probably is something to it that there's a bit of a Lions hangover. These players haven't played together, and in general, I think this was probably our best team at this moment in time. I don't think it'll be our best team from the World Cup, but like this probably was the best team. It's just that a lot of the players hadn't played a lot of games. So, it was a tricky one because if Andy Farrell makes loads of changes from what the starting team would be expected by, and Ireland get hammered, then it's like, well, that was a bad decision. If Ireland played the team this way, the way they played it, and undercooked is the big buzzword, then it's easy to call for changes. So it's the kind of thing hindsight kind of informs the debate, I think, a little bit. But yeah, we didn't have that impact off the bench. I think a key thing was we're bringing on Bundy Aki at the age of 35 to make an impact, and we'll talk about it in the bonus squad section. There's a lot of players who are aging in this squad. They've been great for Ireland. They've been fantastic. I don't think anything they're doing now negates the fact they've been fantastic players over the past 10 years or so. But like, we need that bit of impact, that bit of zip. If we, if we had that, if we had those bit of younger players, but they haven't been blooded yet. So, it was a bit of an issue just not having that kind of impact off the bench.
Yeah, and speaking of the bench, this is as good a time as any to legislate that Tadhg Beirne decision, because obviously both teams had to go to their benches early for the All Blacks. It was injuries, Doherty going off, and there was HIAs, and there was all sorts going on. But in our case, we had that 20-minute red card. What did you make of the actual incident itself?
I think a yellow was. Now it did look like looking back at it, it was a forward pass, and that would have been worth checking. I think in fairness, it wasn't really a tackle at all. He kind of just ran into Tadhg Beirne kind of just ran into Barrett. I think in fairness there wasn't anything cynical going on. I think he just didn't. I think he thought Barrett was there to kind of to kind of be a red herring in the play, and that the ball was going to go to the next player. But yeah, look, it wasn't a tackle. You can't just run into a player. I think it was definitely a penalty, probably a yellow card. Don't think it was a red card. I think a lot of us were saying in the WhatsApp group, they probably talked themselves into it a little bit, saying like, yeah, this happened, and they probably, the way they were talking about it was like, we're going to have to give a red card for this. But yeah, no, I wouldn't have said it was. I wouldn't have said it was a red card.
Yeah, I mean, the TMO, his starting point was the contact with the head. He saw, and he was focusing on that part. But you need to, which is the focus. The reason we're having all these decisions is because we're trying to limit head contact. We're trying to protect players, and I do understand that. But you have to look at the whole context. Tadhg Beirne was upright because Bowden was practically in his face when he received the ball, for one thing, even before you check the pass. So I think Beirne was expecting him to be a blocker, and that he wasn't even going to try to tackle him, that he was going to be tackling someone behind him, that that it was a what they call a backdoor pass from that in that move. But Roygaard, you see Roygaard's body language. You see him when he gives it to him. He's almost saying, "Oh, you sure you want me to give this to you?" But it's Beauden Barrett, so you do it and you give it. And I really think that it was flat at best. But it really did look forward. And for some reason, they said the broadcaster could only give them two angles. They only had access to two angles of it, but it was the TMO's determination to focus on the head contact from the start. So basically, in his mind, his starting point was a red. And they couldn't work their way back from that. I just thought it was interesting that the referee gave us penalties, not only then when he gave him the yellow card for the bunker, but when later on, when he announced that they'd been upgraded to a red, the next line out, we got a penalty straight away from that as well. It was almost kind of making up for it, but it was a harsh decision, but we did, like you say, we did deal with it well. And we responded to it well. We came out of that section with the lead. So that was good, but it still did affect. I mean, you can't miss someone like Tadhg Beirne for like 78 minutes of a game, and it won't affect it. It would affect any team in the world. But listen, we can't do any more but leave that there and maybe talk about some more positive stuff later on. Elsewhere in the November series, New Zealand A defeated the Barbarians, England outlasted the Wallabies at Twickenham, and the Springboks and Scots recorded big wins over Japan and USA, respectively. Meanwhile, at Thomond Park, Munster defeated Argentina 15 by 31 points to 28, becoming the first club to beat all four major Southern Hemisphere nations, and it was also their sixth consecutive win this season. But now we must return to Soldier Field, and while of course the result was disappointing, it's not like Ireland's performance was completely without positives, was it, Kieran?
No, and you mentioned him earlier. Jamison Gibson Park, I think, was the standout player for me for Ireland. I think he's very crucial. And again, we're going to talk about how some players are getting older. I think it's kind of I think it's why it's so key to nail down who plays at 10 now. Obviously, injuries will have a factor in that as well. But I think, in a way, Craig Casey needs exposure because he's going to be the fly half, the scrum half, excuse me, who's in his prime come the next World Cup. But at the same time, James Gibson Park is one of the best players in the world, and you can't and then not play him. I would say the interesting thing is, how do you just working on that Gibson Park Jack Crowley combination is really important because like I said, I think Crowley, he had difficult patches in the game. I don't think he had an entirely bad game, but he had difficult patches in the game. I think James Lowe as well, from a Leinster point of view, really started to grow into the match, especially in the second half. You could see against Munster a few weeks ago, he was trying to make things happen, and it just didn't really come off. But this game was one of the standout players. I think as well, Stuart McCluskey is a player who he's probably been, I don't know if you could say overlooked, because look, at the end of the day, the centres ahead of him are Bundy Aki, Robbie Henshaw, and Gary Ringrose, and it's hard to break into that kind of trio, and you can only play two of them. But I just think McCluskey, I think he had won the last 10 games or something. He had started for Ireland. There was some stat like that going around, but he probably hasn't had as many caps as he should have over the years, but I think he actually played really well. Again, he's not a young player, but he's another option at centre. He's younger than some of the centres we have. So I think that's an area Ireland need to work on building a bit of depth in, because our three main centres are going to be, Rose is the youngest. He'll be about 33 or 32 when the World Cup comes around. But I think in general, Ireland were winning the mental battle for about 60 minutes and then ran out of ideas. And I think there are positives to take out of that. You could see New Zealand were losing their heads a little bit. Every decision that went against them, there were a couple of times they were marched back 10 metres. Every decision that went against them, every time, something didn't go their way, they were losing their heads a little bit. And Ireland weren't doing that. Unfortunately, though, for Ireland, they completely lost their heads in the last 20 minutes. And but there was about an hour there, Leinster were winning, Ireland were winning there's a Freudian slip. Ireland were winning the mental battle, which is something in the past against New Zealand we probably didn't do. I mean, that infamous game in 2013 where Ireland were something like 21-0 up at half time and then just couldn't hang on to it. It was, we were comfortable in our lead for a little while, but then the issue there is we didn't take any of our chances. I think a word on Paddy McCarty. I think he showed, I think the word you use is doggedness. He was impressive for those 15 minutes or so he was on. In fairness, I don't think you can have too high expectations on any prop making his debut in a test in what is effectively an away or a neutral test against New Zealand. But Stuart McCluskey, James Lowe, Jameson Gibson Park, the standout players for us. I feel like we were defending well in parts. We kind of shut New Zealand down a little bit for, again, that kind of first hour. Obviously, Ardy Sabea's try, they had a man up, and they were that was just a beautiful piece of play. But generally speaking, I think we were controlling the game well from a defensive standpoint before we just completely lost a run of things in the second half, in the last 20 minutes. Word on Caelan Doris as well. He was, the second he came on, Ireland had the line out and he got the ball and he ran through about three players. I was sceptical, thinking, is this the game to bring on Doris? Maybe we play him against Japan to ease him into things a little bit because he hasn't played in like since the start of May or something, but he was fantastic, I thought. So yeah, there were positives, there were some positives, but like I think in general it's hard to kind of talk about the positives. We were talking about the negatives. It's like, yeah, we were really good for 60 minutes, but we didn't build a lead. Yeah, we defended well, but we let in 4 tries. But there were a couple of good individual performances that I'd say. And Tommy O'Brien, I think, has been fantastic this season, and I'm glad to see him getting a run of games, because I think if he hadn't had so many injuries when he was younger, I think he would have been a regular for Ireland. But yeah, I mean, I think in general the defence is something we can speak positively for 60 minutes, and the last 20 minutes are kind of better forgotten after they've been analysed. In fairness,
Yeah, I mean, like it's not an excuse really, but you do have to factor in the comparative, like where these two teams were coming from. We're talking about the word undercooked being used. The reason was this Ireland team has not been together since the Six Nations. There was no Sumberturo. A big chunk of them were away with the Lions, whereas New Zealand have literally been together since June, July. They had their rugby championship and they're training together. So they're two squads at different points, and that is the kind of thing that's going to show up in the last 20 minutes. So you do have to take that into account. Obviously, you have to be ready for that, and it's important to it's Andy Farrell's job to and the coaches to have the team ready for the full 80 minutes. But it is a factor you have to realize. And the positives game, you hit them all. Yeah, Tommy O'Brien, James Lowe, Stu McCluskey. I mean, we talk about showing a different look to the All Blacks. I think selecting him was brilliant because there's no problem bringing him in. He's an experienced player. He's a quality player. He does have a one. They say his play is one dimensional, but he does it so well. You get him the ball from any set piece, and he's going to put you on the front foot. It's almost guaranteed. And it was a new look that the All Blacks may not have studied, so they could try some new things with him. And he did a great job. It was a shame. I got the impression that maybe that the plan was to maybe take Ringrose off and put Bundyaki at 13, maybe show a different look there later on, but maybe he was carrying a knock McCluskey or something. But anyway, it was a great performance from him. I thought Jimmy Osborne did pretty well at fullback as well. He had some good runs. He took some good catches in the air. He obviously when your opposite number is Will Jordan, it's going to be a challenge. But I think he acquitted himself extremely well when you consider that there's someone waiting in the wings, Hugo Keenan, to come back in. So I thought he did well. Paddy McCarthy, yes. It was a good start for him. I mean, these Paddy McCarthy's and Sam Prendergast and all coming into the squad, they see something in training. It's not just what we see on the pitch. When they're getting these starts like this and they're being rushed into the team, Jack Boyle might feel a bit hard done by that McCarthy's come in, but they've obviously seen in him that he can get these caps. So that he's ready for being included in a match like this, and he held himself up really well. He was getting stuck in. He was getting involved at the breakdowns as well. It wasn't just his scrummaging, but good performance from him. Yeah, and it was just the positives that I saw most of all was in that try, the furlong try. The one, now unfortunately it was the one try we got, but we're clinging to positives, and this is a type of rugby that I think that can do really well for Ireland if we can get this going and keep it going. And obviously the key to that try was that the entire move, it actually came just after we were told that Ty Burns' card had been upgraded to red. It was immediately after that, and we just advanced up the field. But the key was that we won 2 lineouts, 2 successive lineouts. It was possibly the only time that happened. The lineouts that we were missing were ones in key situations, but this one, we got the first line out. We moved up the field with crash ball, high balls being recovered, phase after phase, and offloads and all sorts. And then we won a penalty. We put it to the corner. We won that that line out. That one was a little bit sloppy, but we recovered and got back into our game, and then we're pummeling them at the line. And there's no better scrum half in the world than Gibson Park for throwing those accurate passes across the face of the defenders. And the one to Furlong, there was one just before that as well, which was really good. But the one to Furlong was perfectly for him. He ran a perfect line, met with the perfect pass, and got over the line. So those are positives. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring that forward. We were trying things again later in the game. They just weren't coming off. But I think I always say that if the problems are on your side, they can be fixed. There's other times when you get blown out in games that you're just not good enough. There's no hope. The other team is just that much better, but that wasn't the case. That wasn't a 13-point game. Had Beauden Barrett converted that last conversion, they would have ended up with a 15-point win, which would have been more ranking points for them. I don't think they deserve that. I don't think we deserve to have that kind of a loss. So I do think it's more, if you could say there's a glass half full kind of loss, I think that could be one of them.
Yeah, I think so. I think in general, like a lot of the issues, like I said, their issues were kind of on our end. They weren't. We played New Zealand like anyone of a certain age who's kind of not just getting into rugby in the past 10 years will remember there were plenty of times we played New Zealand, and even when we had good players and we were doing reasonably well by our standards, we were completely blown away because we just weren't good enough. So I look at it now and think yeah, look, we have plenty to work on, and there are plenty of work-ons, but like this is game one of the November internationals. Like you said, this Ireland team hasn't really played. There were 2 tests over the summer against Georgia and Portugal, but that was a completely different Ireland team, really. So a lot of these Ireland players haven't actually played together in a long time for their country. So yeah, I think overall, like there's plenty of work-ons, but it'll be more. If this was after 4 games of the internationals, I'd be very downbeat and think, look, this is a big issue. But after the first game, it's nearly a little bit to be expected. So I'm not overly concerned, but it is frustrating loss, I think you'd call it.
Absolutely. And of course, the game generated some comments on our Facebook page. We had Craig Grehan, who said, can't win games if you can't win lineouts. We did very well for 60 odd minutes, but ultimately lack of match fitness and off the cuff defense came against us. And then we had John Ireland, who simply said, we were poor, we dominated, but lacked the confidence to kill that game off. And if you want to get involved in the conversation, just head over to our Facebook page after the full-time whistle in Leinster and Ireland matches. Okay, look, we're going to leave it there for now. Many thanks to Kieran for joining us. Look forward to have you back on again soon.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Jeff.
And as ever, be sure to stay tuned to Harpin On Rugby on all the socials during the week, starting with our bonus chat posting on YouTube on Tuesday, where we'll be harping on the overall age of Ireland squad. Then our 80-plus column, where we try to look at the wider rugby world, and that posts every Wednesday over on Substack. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.